Race against time.
Allied air forces had limited resources, but they were put to good effect, particularly when providing air cover for naval forces.
We were going back to Alex, loaded up with the wounded troops, of course, in the early morning, at the dawn, and we were attacked by about 15 Stokers. There was another destroyer with us, an English destroyer, and of course we were doing our thing, zigzagging, avoiding the enemy. And to our great joy, there were 7 hurricanes come across from our fellows, come over from the Egypt side, and they actually chased them away. But in the initial part of the attack, we saw 2 planes were shot down, 2 of these Stokers were shot down, and the rest of them escaped and went away. The hurricanes were chasing them away, but it was the superior firepower of the hurricanes that drove the Stokers out.
As the wounded were shipped out, desperately needed reinforcements were shipped in. Amongst those new to Tobruk was 23-year-old Barney Donnelly from Sydney.
An officer came along and said, well, here's 2 hand grenades and a bayonet, you're now an infantry. And as we were only transport drivers, it was a bit of a shock. And we finished up that evening with the 2nd 15th Battalion on the so-called salient.
In the last few weeks of April, Rommel turned his attention to the western perimeter of Tobruk, capturing 7 perimeter posts in what was known as the Battle of the Salient. The 2nd 24th Battalion, who were occupying Hill 209, suffered particularly heavy losses.
We counted our losses historically from put it down to about 500 wounded, killed and POW on that one day.
Tom Anderson was amongst those taken POW, prisoner of war.
Lined us up to march out, and there was a tank behind us and German guards on either side with automatics slung over their shoulders at the ready. And at that stage, unfortunately for us, now had this same thing happened more or less half an hour earlier, it could have saved the situation for us, because our artillery. They opened up, they were right on the dot.
Tom spent the next 4 years as a POW, escaping 3 times, only to be recaptured.
In the finish, our battalion put up a pretty fair effort. It delayed them for a considerable time and gave them time to move the other battalions up to seal the boundary. And although Tom and his mates were taken prisoner, they'd served their purpose. So they gave us a chance to stabilise, and Tobruk was held in consequence of it.
Under the leadership of Australian General Leslie Morshead, or Ming the Merciless as he was known to the troops, the siege was marked with an aggressive defence. Fighting patrols dominated no man's land, which became a key factor in the holding of Tobruk.
When you went outside this wire on a patrol, there was always a thought in your mind, I think, that I mightn't come back. And they were doing that night after night.
Australian forces were eventually relieved in the last few months of the siege. However, the 2nd 13th remained behind to the very end. The original plan was to hold Tobruk for 2 months. In the end, it was actually held until the 7th of December 1941, some 8 months later. It proved an enormous boost for Allied morale in what was otherwise a very bad year.
The true measure of people is how they respond to adversity. Australian forces at the siege of Tobruk were not found wanting. they responded magnificently in the face of huge odds. The values that our forces demonstrated at Tobruk were integral to their success. We now identify them as defence values. They are professionalism, loyalty, integrity, courage, innovation and teamwork.
Professionalism, as I see it, relates to putting into action your training.
We were professional soldiers but didn't know it until it came out in us.
In many of the operations, the chap that was assisting the doctor, who would normally be a theatre nurse in private life, would have been 12 months before would have been a plumber, but they just had to adapt, and they did a wonderful job.
Everybody became loyal to each other, because in the long run, if it had come to the crunch, you depended on them.
You learn to trust implicitly your mates. You gathered strength from the confidence you gained from each other.
I've got one mate left. He was the first person I met when I joined the army back in June of 1940. He's still my mate today. I think that's loyal.
The war in North Africa was a gentleman's war. I think the only gentleman's war of World War II.
We did treat them with respect, and they sort of treated us the same way, because as Doc Goodworth said, they're some mother's son.
We thought we'd be killed, to be honest with you. We thought it was suicide. But you had to have a go, and we did. I brought Jack's personal effects home to his mother and father, and he was an only son, and it was very hard bringing that back to them, those people, and there was tears all round, especially with me too.
I always say that the best weapon you can have is a captured one, and we had an old heavy Italian machine gun. I couldn't get it to work. Had it even to the workshops, so nobody could operate it. And one of the fellows there got a brilliant idea. He got some margarine from somewhere, and he melted that. He added some additives. I won't mention what they were. There's one a remarkable one. And finally, the solution that he got the machine gun working, and it became very valuable to us in the defence of the post-war. That's my idea of what innovation is.
You had to work as a team. Like the engineers had to be there and be out, and if you're going out to attack something, they had to be there to lift the mine so as you get out through the minefield. And you knew that when you got back, the engineers would close that gap again.
A ship's company has got to work together. Otherwise, it doesn't become a ship. You've got to have all the people in the ship pulling in the same direction.
These values that were so gallantly demonstrated throughout the siege of Tobruk are still today critical to the success of our Australian Defence Organisation.
We've got a wonderful country in Australia, and we need these values, and we need them to be maintained. And I think actually with our young people and with our armed forces now that those values are being maintained, and rightly so.